Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and in this video we're going to be doing the top 25 Kickstarter campaigns from 2019. Now you might be wondering right off the bat, where does this list come from and how was it created and what games can and cannot be on this particular list? Well, the first thing I'm going to mention is the fact that this list, like the one I released recently, which was called the top 25 solo games from 2019, were actually a driven poll that was landed inside the Rolling Solo board game community group on Facebook, and that's where I polled the actual community here at Rolling Solo in order to determine what they thought in that prior video was the top 25 solo games of 2019, and that's exactly what I did again here with the top 25 Kickstarter campaigns of 2019, because I really was actually interested to see what the community as a whole was the most excited for in terms of campaigns that ran this year. Now that's where this list is going to be very different than the other list, because the other list is talking about games that have actually been released within 2019, whereas this one's talking about just the Kickstarter campaigns that launched in 2019. So obviously the first restriction to being on this list is you have to have had a Kickstarter project actually out there and running during 2019 to even be on the list. And the second thing is you have to, of course, have a solo mode in play, because otherwise it won't be on Rolling Solo. But beyond that, it's pretty much open season. So there was a lot of Kickstarters that ran in 2019 during the year that were a part of this poll, and we had a total of about over 70 different projects or more, and of course all the voting came in for all of them, and now I'm really excited to kind of go through the top 25 of them. Now I could go through all 69, but I'd put through, or 69 to 70 of them, I would literally put everybody to sleep, and I wouldn't be able to do it in a concise manner, but putting it down to 25 and maybe spending about a minute per game or Kickstarter campaign in this case should work. And the last thing I'll say, of course, is that the fact that because we're talking about Kickstarter campaigns, I'm actually going to be going through and showing you the Kickstarter campaign screen, so that it will also help you to actually check out that Kickstarter. And there are some of them, potentially, that might even have late pledges going on after the fact. So if you happen to see some of these Kickstarter projects, you might go, oh, I didn't even know about that particular project. Now I'm actually kind of intrigued by it, and give me that link. I want to check it out and maybe even late back it. So not all of them are going to have late backing available, but you never know. You might get lucky. But this, again, was more of just trying to get that barometer of what is the community the most excited for in the future in terms of games coming out. So without further ado, hope you enjoy the list. Let's start with number 25. So coming in at number 25 to start off the list is Terraforming Mars Turmoil. This is created by Stronghold Games. I don't think there's any solo gamer out there that even has maybe a few months worth of experience with solo games that doesn't know about Terraforming Mars. This is a highly, highly, highly recommended game, and anything that's going to add more content to this particular game is going to give you pure gold. Literally every expansion, of which I've actually unboxed almost all of them on the channel myself, although I haven't done a playthrough, they are beautifully designed and the gameplay is fantastic. Every time you play the game, you have different strategies to roll through, different things you can try. This one I really, really highly recommend that you check out. And of course, in terms of the actual Kickstarter itself, it's no surprise that it landed in the 25 position. Next up in position 24 is the Isle of Cats, created by Frank West. You can see 467,000 pounds. Frank West is the creator of the City of Kings. So hopefully, if for those of you that are unaware of this particular game but know the City of Kings, this is the same creator. Now, this particular game myself, I actually wasn't even as focused on this one as I probably should have been, because this one actually is high on the list, as you guys have rated this up at 24. So now I'm even more intrigued by this one, but absolutely has a very interesting, and again, as soon as I see this, I think Feast of Odin almost automatically, although that's not the only place that you have this whole tile placement thing going on. but still just comes to the forefront of my mind as I scroll through this. Looking to be a very well-produced game, and I can see why people are excited about this. I mean, it's got cats in it. There's a large amount of people that are thoroughly obsessed with cats, and that would probably pull them into it automatically. But even better is that the gameplay looks to be very interesting as well. So this one landed in the 24th position, and for me personally, actually was quite surprising, but it was a pleasant surprise as I really enjoyed the City of Kings. Next up for 23, we have Arceus, and this one has lots of miniatures. It's an immersive campaign. It's a dungeon crawler, or at least it has that mode built in, and it's created by the authors of Seven Wonders and a bunch of other very well-known games as well. Was very successful on Kickstarter, and you can see here it was actually recently funded near the tail end of this year. Just going through the actual Kickstarter page itself, again, has that Pharaoh and Egyptian theme to it that we don't get many of these types of games, and I think that's another reason why people were driven to this one, is that the theme is something that isn't overdone, and of course it has that steampunk element added in as well. Lots of stretch goals. One of the things I was really interested in when I saw this particular campaign was the fact that there was some actual walls involved in the dungeon crawl itself, with looked to be kind of interesting. You can see right here in terms of how they actually present the dungeon itself. It's a lot more lifelike. But again, another one of those epic campaign type style games with miniatures involved. So it may not hit for everybody, but it certainly was one that solo gamers had their eyes on. In the 22nd slot, we have Zombicide 2nd Edition. It's just like it was actually meant to be with all those twos going on there. 22nd position, 2nd Edition. There's a lot of content in this one. This one was a huge Kickstarter. There's expansions. There's a role-playing element involved. There's tons of backers. Lots of money involved in this one. And to be honest, it has a really interesting theming going on with the Washington ZC expansion included in. Of course, we all know that with the coming electronic kind of connection into board games from CMON going into 2020, this is going to be a game that's going to be on the table and to be of use with that new system coming up. So there is a lot more excitement for this particular product due to that, plus the fact they've gone back to the modern era, of course, and that was where the original love for Zombicide really started to grow. And of course, the miniatures are always amazing, but there's a ton of them. So again, as I say with any Zombicide game I've ever mentioned during any of my videos, it really does come down to picking and choosing a game that works for you. They even went all out to have a travel Zombicide. So you can straight up just get a miniature version of Zombicide to play anywhere you want if you don't want to have to deal with the insane amount of stuff. So they've kind of hit all angles with this one with all kinds of content. It's Zombicide. It's a staple in the hobby, and it's also an entry point for a lot of solo gamers as well, especially into that kind of dungeon crawl mentality. It was certainly one of the ones that brought me into the hobby early on, but yes, it is definitely something you're going to expect to see over and over again in the future as well, with new iterations and new designs. In the 21st position is Carnival Zombie 2nd Edition. So this is a 2nd edition from obviously an original Carnival Zombie out there, which solo gamers got their hands on and have already played. But again, 2nd editions are a-okay as long as the campaign ran during this year. And this is one that a lot of solo gamers are excited to see because, of course, more stretch goals, more content, revisioning of that 1st edition to obviously likely correct some things as well as streamline some things. This is a game that if you're looking at it from the standpoint of, oh, it's zombies, I'm going to pass on this one, I've got enough of those, you should really look again because the gameplay in this one is going to be vastly different than what you expect. And that's what makes this thing stick for a lot of solo gamers, is the actual zombie theme itself that's actually present in this game is great, and it's well ingrained in the gameplay, but the gameplay itself is awesome. And I cannot wait myself to even see this one, as I didn't get a chance to play the 1st edition, but heard only good things. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with the 2nd edition myself, and you guys were obviously pretty excited about it, putting it at 21. In the 20th position of the list, we have Chronicles of Drunagor, Age of Darkness. If I'm hopefully not butchering the name of that, I think I've said that in the past, and I probably felt just as bad when I said it. like I broke something. But this one comes from Creative Game Studios. It raised quite a bit of money with 3,000 plus backers. This is one that I actually have less experience with personally, but it's very intriguing that this one actually landed on the list in the 20th position. It obviously goes to show that there is a lot of interest in this particular game, but I do remember mentioning this one during one of my Rolling on Kickstarters, as I was very intrigued by this whole game tray presentation of the dungeon itself in terms of how it's presented and also how it's stored was really, really nice. So I am intrigued by this one, and you guys pushing this up to the 20th position makes me all the more intrigued that there's obviously something special going on here. I'm going to have to dig a little further myself to figure out what that is, but it certainly looks to have some pieces and elements that are different than other dungeon crawlers, and really, in today's day and age, in order to stand out, that's exactly what you need. Number 19 moves us right into Time of Legends Destinies. That's right, this is a hook in to the Joan of Arc behemoth of a Kickstarter. Again, this is a collaboration between Lucky Duck Games and Mythic Games, one that I'm 100% in every way, shape, and form very excited for. I really want to see what they're going to do with this, because remember, we're talking about the individuals that put together Chronicles of Crime mixed with the individuals that put together Joan of Arc. So we're talking big time potential here. So the excitement level for this one actually surprisingly is a little lower on the list than I actually thought it would be. But it's likely because maybe not a lot of it has been provided out there for everyone to see just yet. So again, this is just a gauge based on the community, and the fact it's even on the list obviously means there's a lot of excitement for it. But it's going to have that app-driven environment going through to really immerse you in the experience. And you're going to have the QR codes that we're all familiar from, like I mentioned, from Chronicles of Crime. This is one I'm highly, highly looking forward to. It's even got a community scenario editor on top of everything else. And you know when it's Mythic, or in terms of Lucky Duck, in terms of the Kickstarter itself and the campaign, they do a really good job of incorporating all the angles here. So very, very excited for this one, and a very good choice by the community. The 18th position belongs to Great Wall board game. This is a new board game from Awakened Realms, of course. Ancient China is where it's set, and it's unique worker placement and a Euro game, which actually, when you put that hand in hand with Awakened Realms, you wouldn't normally think that would be a thing, but that has become a thing, and I am very excited to see what Awakened Realms can do in the worker placement in Euro space, because most of the games like This War of Mine, Nemesis, Aetherfields, Tainted Grail, all those types of games were all very much Ameritrash style games. So seeing them jump into the Euro space and going for this, of course, with their fantastic miniatures and the production quality, very, very excited to see this. Now, normally what happens with these types of Kickstarters is a lot of people, especially with the prior ones they've done like Nemesis and Tainted Grail, a lot of people say it's presentation over the actual quality of the gameplay until they actually get the game. And I'm literally telling you right now, the track record from Awakened Realms over the last while, those 4 or 5 Kickstarters they've most recently done have been absolutely awesome, and they not only look good, but they play well too. And so that really gets me excited for this one, hoping that they can pull out a big win here in the Euro space and knock it out of the park. In the 17th position is Bloodborne, the board game, and this obviously has a very, very strong IP coming over from the video game space with PlayStation, so a lot of individuals are on board with this one just strictly from the IP alone. So there is this interest in it from that standpoint, and also the interest that trying to see whether the gameplay is actually going to live up to the miniature quality of this one. Crazy amount of money raised, lots of backers obviously. And in terms of the actual production quality, most CMON games are over and above what you'd expect in a board game, especially in the miniatures front. This is absolutely going to be that dungeon crawl feel, essentially, is what they're going for here. You're going to be flipping tiles over, moving them, seeing all kinds of monsters, dealing with them. It's going to be quite the battle. And there's tons of miniatures, like literally a whole bunch. So if you're really into this IP, this is like the best thing that's ever happened to you. What I'm really hoping, though, is that the gameplay holds up. Thankfully, a most recent arrival from CMON, Cthulhu Death May Die, had exactly the same type of, I wonder if the miniatures and the gameplay are going to line up. Yes, I can inform you that that game stands on its own 2 legs and is going to be around for quite some time in the solo gaming space. It's a really well-designed game, and I really hope that a game like Bloodborne follows in its footsteps in terms of its success of it actually being a fun and well-designed game, as well as looking great. So, obviously you guys put this on the list for a reason. There's lots of excitement behind it. It's yet to be seen how this is going to pan out, but the excitement is certainly there. In the 16th position, we have Waste Knights 2nd Edition. This is a post-apocalyptic board game of adventure and survival set in a dystopian Australia for 1 to 4 players. Was very successful on Kickstarter, and I do remember this project when it landed. However, I didn't focus entirely on it. So this is actually really intriguing. Again, this is why these lists are so great, because it even brings back some Kickstarters that I looked at and then didn't actually fully dive into. So you guys have obviously gone ahead and pegged this one as being something that I should look into, as well as the community should check out. There's an excitement level here for this one that's quite high. Again, I have some post-apocalyptic games coming to me, so that might be the reason why I held off on this one. But again, thanks to you guys, now I'm probably going to dig in and see what this one is all about. But overall, I don't have much experience with it, so I can't speak to it too much further. But to let you know, thank you for letting me know that there's excitement for this one. Gonna check it out a little further, and hopefully this also allows other people to notice this one as well. Number 15 was Hexplore The Sands of Shirax, and yes, I absolutely remember this particular campaign, as I do with all the Hexplore games that have come out before it. This was a lot of fun. I did do a Kickstarter preview of this one on the channel when it was going through its campaign, so very, very familiar with this one, as well as the previous entries or volumes within this series. Again, as I've said in the past, this game literally is a perfect example of taking an RPG and bringing it over into the board game medium. So if that's the kind of thing you're into, or the types of games you like to kind of control a story and a character and build them up and really have that RPG feel of building your character up, not so much the board game leveling up that we experience more so these days, this is exactly the type of thing you're going to want to go after. And of course, the customizable options on this thing has kind of gone off the charts because of the amount of entries and volumes and expansions in play here. But something to definitely look into. Obviously, the excitement is there, being that this is in the 15th position. Can't wait for where they take this particular series in the future. Moving right along to Anachrony, Fractures of Time Expansion and Infinity Box. This is set for 14 on the list. This one, of course, most solo gamers are very, very familiar with Mind Clash games, as they do cater to solo play, and Anachrony has been a staple since it came out originally, and this is going to get you more content. We're revisiting the whole time travel situation. So if you're wanting a futuristic game that has really, really well ingrained mechanics that actually make logical sense based on the time travel, and I don't know, the best way to describe this in the shortest amount of time essentially is you have these time travel elements going on, and it's allowing you to kind of ping pong around inside the game to obtain things from the past, present, future, all that type of stuff in a really, really smart and well-designed way. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the best way I could essentially sum it up quite quickly. And of course, more content for this thing is never going to be a bad thing. The actual quality of the game itself and presentation's been off the charts, so I can't wait to see the additional content that's being added in as part of this Kickstarter. This was a great choice by the community, and Anachrony is certainly a staple in the solo community. Next up, in the 13th position, we had Trumpbang Legends. This comes from Simon Games. You can see it. Simon has quite a few Kickstarters throughout the year. Now, this one didn't bring in as big of a number as it did in the prior entries on this list, but the excitement for this one, I believe, is higher based on the fact that what they're actually doing in this game is different than what is to be expected from a CMON experience. Bloodborne was very much similar to some of the things that they have tried and done before, although with a new IP wrap on it. And of course, Zombicide is a new iteration, but what they're doing with this one in terms of the storytelling is they're allowing you to actually not only change the state of the game with these built-in slides, I don't even know how to call them, they're basically sleeves on the game board itself, and you slide a card inside of it, and that is going to actually change the outcome of the game as you go through it. And you can see, of course, lots of miniatures involved to give you lots of different content within the story. But if I pass buy all of that, and of course the big pile of stretch goals here, we get into the game where you can see multiple areas to store these cards, and you're going to be changing the face of the game as you play through it, and your reference point for those changes is going to be what's slidden into that board itself, which is really cool. It's remembering your actions, as it mentions here. Another really cool point of this is that you can just fold it up, close it up in the box, walk away, and come back to it later. So that was something that attracted me to it too, was the fact that these campaign games are hard to set up, hard to manage, and hard to get back into later. It's very easy if you can do this by actually literally opening the game up and everything that you already had preset sitting there ready to go. That's a nice touch, and it's different than what they've done in the past with their other games. So kudos to them for doing something new and trying something different that way. I think that's why this thing caught on. Moving right along, number 12 on the list, Shadows of Kilforth, a fantasy quest game for 1 to 4 heroes. If you're familiar with Tristan Hall and his prior entry, Gloom of Kilforth, which absolutely won some awards and is an absolute favorite in the solo gaming community. When this Kickstarter launched, I got excited almost immediately because the artwork in this game is off the charts. And it's not just the artwork. The game itself, the original game at least, was in development for years. And so when it finally released, the wait for that to come out was extremely interesting and exciting. And now more content through this Kickstarter is being released, and you can see the artwork is just as beautiful as it was before. Things have obviously been tweaked and changed. You've got new environments to explore. You're adding in some additional cards and different types of gameplay mechanics throughout this one. Plus, there's even some beautiful neoprene mats that are just ridiculously nice. I don't know if I'll actually run into them here, but during the updates is where you'll want to check out where those pictures are. But you can see the actual artwork of the game is phenomenal, but the gameplay, even better than that, is great. And it's designed from a solo gaming perspective as well. And that's one of the biggest keys with this one. One of the reasons why I gravitated towards it so heavily was because of that focus on the solo gamer. You can see here, even on the Kickstarter itself, right away making obvious mention that solo play is a big integral part to the gameplay itself. So really not surprised to see this on the list, but very happy to see this as high up the list as it is, because in my opinion, this thing should be cresting into the top 10. Here we go with number 11, Dice Throne Adventures and Season 1 Rerolled, a cooperative and solo campaign inspired by Diablo with exploration, gold, treasure, upgrades, minions, and epic boss battles. A very successful Kickstarter. Dice Throne has been around for some time, and this just revisits that and adds more content. Now, just to let you guys know, I've never played Dice Throne. I don't know if that's a sin or not, but it's something I really want to check off. I want to give it a shot, see what it's all about. I love Diablo, the video game, so I can see how this could potentially be right up my alley, but I have no comments to be made about the gameplay itself, and really would be banking on you guys in the comments to let me know what you think of it. But in terms of its design and appearance, it looks absolutely beautiful, but there's a ton of content for this thing, so knowing where to start, even for someone like me, is tough to know exactly what to do in terms of how much content is, what I should be going after. But I'm certainly intrigued by this one, and it's not surprising in the least that this is just about to crest into the top 10 for this particular list, as there is a lot of people that really enjoy this one. So this Kickstarter was very successful, and I'm looking forward to getting a chance to give this a shot myself in the future. And now we move into the top 10 of this top 25 list, starting off with Dawn of Madness in the 10th position. This is coming from a company that strictly loves to focus around solo games, and their prior entry, as I mentioned in the past, Deep Madness, is where a lot of people are going to be familiar with Dimension games, but now they're moving into a different style of game here, but still within the same universe that Deep Madness was presented. So you can see right here, this is what the game board looks like. If you're looking for additional details, this Kickstarter will give you quite a bit, as it's a very lengthy page page worth of information, but this one has a lot of excitement in the solo gaming community behind it. The one thing I will mention on this one, though, is that the actual estimated delivery date is about 2 years out. So that's something to take note of, is the fact it won't be coming in 2020, but the year after. That might be the only negative against it, besides not knowing personally how the gameplay actually flows. But again, lots of miniatures with this one too. But I know there was lots in Deep Madness, and that didn't stop the gameplay from being awesome. I really enjoyed Deep Madness quite a bit, but this is a different style of game in this particular one you'll want to look into. But there's a lot going on here, and I couldn't spend the whole time talking about it because it's a huge Kickstarter page with lots and lots of information. But again, not surprised in the least that this landed in the top 10. There's still 5 days to go as of my recording of this video, so you will still have a chance, most likely, to back the project if it's of interest to you. Number 9 on the list is Folklore, The Fall of the Spire. So there is a new expansion released here. We have the previous box and original Dark Tales expansion, a nice actual storage solution for Folklore and the miniatures involved. It was very successful, 600,000 plus, almost 5,000 backers. This is a game in the solo gaming community that is known for, again, it's very immersive. That is a very good way to describe this, and they already nail this in their description themselves. If you're looking for a game that is trying to nail that RPG, not just the feel, where I was saying earlier with Hexport that it nails the feel of an RPG in a board game form, but this more so nails the actual theming and immersion of an RPG in board game form. That's the best way to describe this one, and it's very, very beloved in the solo gaming community. So I'm not, like I said, surprised in the least that this thing made it to 9 on the list, but very excited personally as I have all prior content for this one and looking to pick up all the new content inside this Kickstarter. So lots and lots to check out here for sure, and lots of adventures to go on. Another thing I really liked about the environment tiles that they use is they're not actually like a cardboard tile. They are actually more like paper thin, but very high quality prints that are very vibrant, more vibrant than anything I've seen actually printed on cardboard, except maybe not counting Madara, where that new print style with the UV coating is really, really sharp. But here they have very, very high glossy, very immersive environments, but on these very thin sheets that are durable as well. So you can have many of them stacked and not have a lot of weight and a lot of tiles everywhere. So I think of things like Mansions of Madness, where you have giant piles and stacks of heavy tiles. You know, in this particular situation, it feels like you just have a bunch of paper in a pile, except it's a lot better quality than paper. But still, I really liked that design within Folklore, and of course that's been following through all the expansions. Lots of great content to look at here. Check out the Kickstarter. Highly recommend this one, and you guys are obviously excited for this one in the future. In the 8th position is Sleeping Gods. This comes from Ryan Lockett, so the creator behind Above and Below, Near and Far, and this is an individual who has, in my opinion, been gravitating more towards supporting the solo gaming hobby than he did originally with his original works. So Above and Below didn't have that solo potential, although there were some third-party ways of going about it from my understanding. Near and Far, however, did start opening up the solo and cooperative side of his designs. And then here with Sleeping Gods, he actually opened the doors wide open from the get-go inside the core experience, and the ability to actually enjoy an experience that he creates, which I can tell you right now, in terms of its immersion and its look and feel, and actually the mechanics are very, very low on the barrier of entry to get in and enjoy. But the actual depth is high. The actual amount of content to enjoy is high. This is a very, very unique designer in that he does all of his own artwork as well as on his own design of the gameplay itself. That's something that's very much a rarity in the hobby. Typically there's more people involved. He does this all himself essentially, with maybe a few helping hands on the side here and there, but for the most part he covers this himself. So this was one, as soon as it was mentioned off the gate that it was going to be solo playable, I was all over this one. And I can, again, with these top 10 picks you guys have chosen, I'm not probably be repeating myself quite a bit, but you're picking some very, very good games to be in this top 10 list because the excitement level on some of these things are very, very high. Really looking forward to them in the coming year. In the number 7 position is the Isofarian Guard from Sky Kingdom Games, a very successful Kickstarter of which I did a Kickstarter preview on the channel. I enjoyed this a lot. I really hope you guys enjoyed seeing this game in action. And of course, changes were made even after the Kickstarter preview and during development of this particular one. I am just as excited as you guys as seeing what the final product of this thing is going to turn out to be like. Of course, most of what you saw during the preview is going to stick, but there are some major changes that actually were made during the Kickstarter, during development, after the Kickstarter. One of those things I noticed right here was the skill tree design, for instance, was very much just around here, straight down through to the bottom in the original Kickstarter preview, but now you can see has been vastly changed to allow for many different configurations of how you want to upgrade your characters. So again, listening to feedback that was given during the Kickstarter previews and the individuals that backed the game, totally understand the excitement level of this from a solo gamer's perspective, because this is something that a solo gamer could sit down and experience kind of an immersive narrative-driven campaign, which you have an app called the Foreteller that's going to give you full voice narration, which is amazing. So it's going to immerse you even further into it. We saw some of that actually during my Kickstarter preview and even on the Kickstarter previews inside of this Kickstarter itself. So again, if you want to check this out for further information, totally understand why this is in the top 10 for this year, because again, I think the barrier to entry to this one is low in terms of the enjoyment factor. And I think that's what really appealed to the solo community. So excited to see how this one ends and completely understand your excitement on this one. Number 6 on the list is Alter Quest. This comes from Blacklist Games, Adam and Brady Sadler. This is a 1 to 4 player design game, so right out of the box you're going to be able to play this solo. As we know from Blacklist Games, the majority of what they offer has solo play built in. They definitely cater to the solo community, and there's a lot of excitement for this one. Of course, when you first look at the actual video even here, just itself, you can see the game board. You can think right away Hero Quest. That's the first thing you think of when you see the layout of this thing. But in terms of the gameplay, they're bringing over the MDS or the modular deck system from prior games like Street Masters, Brook City into this thing. So again, that system is going to see, itself revisited again in this one here. But there's a lot of excitement for the adventures that are going to happen in this, and of course, there's going to be a lot of nostalgic, feelings coming back as you play through this game. Is going to be my guess, based on this particular city. You can see right here, as I mentioned, the MDS system in Brook City and Street Masters. And again, the whole point is to allow for these one-off experiences or campaign play, kind of whichever you prefer. You can go either way. Lots of different miniatures inside the game with this one, of course, being that it's got that dungeon crawl mentality going for it, and completely understand why this one is so high up the solo gaming point of interest on this particular list. Again, it even has a tie-in here with the Gloomhaven designer, Isaac Childress, here going ahead and adding some content in to make things even more exciting in the stretch goal box. So lots of stuff that was unlocked in this one, and there's a lot of people waiting for this one to arrive. And with that, we move into the top 5 of the top Kickstarter campaigns from 2019. In the 5th position, it belongs to Too Many Bones, Splice and Dice, plus series reprint. So again, for all the individuals loving Too Many Bones and wanting more content, this was a Kickstarter that allowed you to get back into the Too Many Bones universe for the very first time, or like I mentioned, if you've been there before, giving you more content, new content to chew on. So this one, Splice and Dice, has, again, it's going to be revisiting many of the individuals that we learned about through prior different efforts. And even going through this particular page as I talk to you guys, I'm remembering back to when the actual Too Many Bones game itself was given Solo Game of the Year. So that's really, really cool again to see. That was in 2018, which does, for some weird reason, feel like a long time ago, but it really isn't, because that would have happened in December. But Too Many Bones is one of those games that I'm just never going to get rid of. and I understand completely again why this has been raised up the charts on this particular video, all the way up to the 5th position, because the excitement level is really high. This Splice and Dice thing has got this whole system involved between a couple different mats of where you're basically goofing around trying to create and kind of be like a mad scientist in the world of Too Many Bones, which is going to be really cool. So essentially a way to build a tyrant, and you know, you got your neoprene lab mat there and stuff like this. Like, I just cannot wait to see how this is all going to pan out. I wasn't able during the Kickstarter to do any preview on this one, but my interest spiked off the charts just due to my love of Too Many Bones. So again, no surprise here for the number 5th pick, and a very, very good one. Number 4 on the list is Madara, Unintentional Malum, the Complete Trilogy. This was a behemoth of a Kickstarter when this thing landed. So we had the original Madara Kickstarter land years ago, and that particular Kickstarter took a number of years to fulfill. But once it started fulfilling and individuals started seeing this coffin-sized box back here, at least the first one, and this insanely huge Act 1 campaign-driven experience you can have through this game. Again, kind of highlighting areas that necessarily aren't saturated in the board game hobby, plus the really high production quality behind the actual first delivery of the Kickstarter. The UV spotting on the tiles with the dungeon was a really nice touch, something that isn't really done in, now it has been done in other games in the past, but it's not something that's done very often, and it's a really nice touch to the game. It really makes the boards come alive, but it's just unique. The whole experience is the best way to say it. It's very unique and different, and the narrative and the world and the time that the individuals who put this game together have put into this is well beyond what you get even in the box itself. They have videos describing how the world came to be and why are you even here, well beyond what you'd expect in a typical board game in terms of a backstory. So the excitement level for this when it hit on Kickstarter in this campaign for this year as a reprint, plus saying, hey, we're going to actually finish out the entire trilogy. Obviously, that's going to bring in a ton more people into the fray, and it was a really exciting Kickstarter. I got to do a Kickstarter preview of this, being that I had the original core experience, and it was a lot of fun to actually do that. So this one does not surprise me in the least, and certainly looking forward to the insane amount of content that's coming out across the 3 different huge boxes for this one in the future. Number 3 on the list is Aeon Trespass Odyssey. It's an epic 1 to 4 player massive campaign game of adventures, base building, and tactical battles with giant monsters. So the first thing you're going to think when you see this particular game, and it was very successful on Kickstarter, cresting over $1 million, 8,000 backers plus in this one. There's a lot of content with this one, and in terms of the quality, at least the presentation that they're going for, it's a very clean cut looking game in terms of its artistic design and direction. It also very much has a very similar feel in terms of its miniature structure to Kingdom Death Monster. If you're taking a look at the miniatures, you very much can tell that there's a lot of inspiration here from Kingdom Death to this design. Now, this design is a very different game than Kingdom Death, but in terms of its presentation, at least during the Kickstarter, I think the reason why there was a lot of interest towards checking this one out was because of how popular Kingdom Death Monster is, and maybe what this game can do different from that game. Almost essentially like a step in the evolution chain in terms of what's beyond Kingdom Death. Now, Kingdom Death's an ever-changing game, so to compare the two actually goes down a massive bunny trail, which I won't get into in this particular video, but I can completely understand the excitement level of this one because they're really, really biting off a lot with this in terms of what they're trying to accomplish, and there's a lot of excitement behind that because if they can pull it off, it could be something really, really special. And so that's, I'm thinking, the reason behind the really high amount of excitement for this one and all the different angles they're trying to cover and different elements they're trying to add into this game to really ramp this thing to the next level. Lots of unlocked content, looks absolutely beautiful, very intrigued by it, don't have any familiarity whatsoever with the gameplay, but really want to dive in myself to see if this thing is going to hold up over time. Number 2 on the list as we get down to the final selection very, very soon from the Rolling Solo board game community. Number 2 slot goes to Etherfields. This was a massive, massive Kickstarter. I don't think anyone actually missed this Kickstarter. The only people that might have missed it might not have wanted to pledge at the current time, but it looks like the late pledges are available and they raised a ton of money during the Kickstarter. Wouldn't be surprised if that carried over a lot to the PM. And PM being the pledge manager, 32,000 backers. Like, are you insane? Like, that is ridiculous how many backers that is. In a typical project, you'd be happy to see up to 10,000. 32,000 is just going off the scale at that point. The game itself, in terms of its presentation, is beautiful. I did get a chance to check out the Kickstarter preview for this thing. Now, the actual contents of what they're showing here in these shots are different and more developed than what was in the preview. For instance, the character boards that I actually did my playthrough with were quite a few steps back from the ones that they showed at the end, but that's a good thing because one thing that I can give kudos for with Awakened Realms is they're really good at listening to their community and adapting and developing their game and changing it as they go through the Kickstarter cycle, essentially. So they'll look at things and get feedback, and if they hear enough of the same feedback, they'll actually go ahead and they'll make that change. You can see here they even threw in my quote there, which was really cool. So Etherfields is an immersive experience. That honestly is it. Once you get inside this game and you start playing, you're not going to want to stop because it constantly baits you into trying to figure out what's going on, because the presentation and the actual direction of the game is there isn't any. You just go into this world with completely not understanding why you're there, what's going on, how come these things are coming after you, how come you have to deal with all these problems and issues and see this and that, deal with this and that, and then slowly the pieces start coming together, and then that is supposed to, my guess is, by the end of the game, give you the full picture, or at least start to allow you to put some ties of things together to find out what's really going on in this dream world. So, long story short on this one, because I could go on about this one for quite a while, as I do have a lot of experience with it, is I am very excited, as you can probably tell. You guys are obviously very excited for this one, and I think because, again, with Awakened Realms track record that I talked about before, the stakes are quite high on this one because of the great games they put out before, and the fact they're nailing the actual gameplay of things like this War of Mine and Nemesis and Lord of Hellas and all these games. When it gets to one of these types of massive Kickstarters with this many backers and this type of scale, people are really expecting this thing to be, kind of a knock out of the park, a home run all the way around. And so really excited to see how the final thing's going to turn out. Absolutely could have seen this one in the first position as well, easily, but there actually is another. The number 1 Kickstarter campaign of 2019 from the Rolling Solo community was Oathsworn Into the Deep One. This was a grand 1 to 4 player dark fantasy board game, epic story, brand new mechanics, and giant monsters. This thing meshes a bunch of really interesting and, in my opinion, the strongest points of what a narrative board game is all about, mixed with some really epic combat battles in a way that's very, very consumable from a campaign standpoint. So for instance, you start going through part 1 of a particular chapter, dealing with all the narration parts of it. You've got your actual narration going on. You have choices to be made. Those choices are affecting your characters as you go through this first part of the story. This all has a direct effect on likely a battle or some type of encounter that you're going to have to deal with, and everything choice-wise that you made at the beginning portion of that chapter is then going to affect how that chapter ends when the battle comes around. So everything's constantly interconnected and changing and also adapting to what you're choosing to do, meaning that those battles are going to change, not only just because the AI cards and everything designed around the actual gameplay very much reminisces things like Kingdom Death in terms of like AI cards and, the reactionary attacks, and you don't know what's coming next, but also the fact that your choices from that narrative portion are going to come over as well. On top of that, what's really cool mechanically is the fact that there's some really interesting strategy that I've mentioned before, and I'll highlight again, between using dice versus cards. If you're using dice, it's basically boom or bust. You're either going big time with some serious successes if you roll really well, or you're basically rolling into the ditch and you have the worst roll ever, complete failure, and it just busts on you. That's kind of how dice work. It's either going to be really, really good for you, really, really bad for you. Sometimes it lands in between. The thing with the cards that makes it interesting is instead of rolling dice, you can choose to actually not roll, but flip cards, or you can take some cards and some dice. And you might be wondering, well, why would I do that? Well, the strategy behind those things is really because as you see more cards, as you flip more cards, you then become more aware of what other cards are left in that deck. And these particular decks resemble the exact same sides of these dice in terms of the odds. So basically, as you go through your deck, you might have a particular attack where you strike out 3 times in a row. Well, you just got rid of 3 blanks. So that means your odds of actually hitting are higher now on yellow cards because you've already burnt 3 of the yellow blanks. So now when you do your next attack, you're going to go, well, why would I roll dice? I'm going to go right for that card deck and hope I hit big time. So you get that kind of strategic element to say, yeah, I had a really poor outing the last time, but I can balance it out by actually strategically choosing to go to the deck the next time, knowing the odds are higher that I'll have better success. So that was really cool, and I like that because it gives you freedom. You can be a dice chucker, you can be a card flipper, it's whatever you want to do, and I really like that. So there's lots to be said about this one, and there's also that element of unlocking actual monsters of these boxes as you go through all the different chapters. So the element of surprise, the element of just excitement of like what is coming next, what's the next big thing we have to deal with, or maybe little thing, whatever it is, you don't know. That's part of the adventure. So very excited for this. Everybody else out there seems to be excited for this. It's not a shock whatsoever. I did a Kickstarter preview on this one showing the gameplay, and wasn't able to show everything because I didn't really want to spoil the actual first encounter, because that's exactly what was sent to me, was literally the first encounter. And I did a video here, which is actually right on the Kickstarter page itself down here in the gameplay area, which I think because of the stretch goals, it basically got, you know, pushed way, 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 way down. But there's gameplay stuff down here as well. So there's videos, and then right here, playthrough, rollings. And again, beware of spoilers, because I was getting into that section where I was starting to talk about how this Chapter 1 campaign can unfold, essentially, right? So I tried to keep it high level to avoid that, because that's really the first encounter or chapter you'll be dealing with when the real final game shows up. But anyway, long story short, had a lot of fun with this one, and this one and Aetherfields, in my mind, were the two that I expected to see at the top. I just didn't know which one would win out of the two. So it's cool to see that Oathsworn got the majority of the votes, but I can also see it in a completely different day of the week. If I happened to run the same poll, maybe different people would have voted in, and Aetherfields would have made it to the top. They're both extremely exciting games. There's lots to be... There's really, just in general, now that we've essentially wrapped up to 25, there's a lot of games in this 25 to look forward to in the next year, and that's not including the 40, 50, 60, 70 or more games that are solo based coming out as well. And there's always those gems that were not looking or not as exciting of a campaign, but are going to come out later on and just kind of strike a chord with the community and become big time hits. And some of those are sometimes even more exciting than the obvious ones. So we'll see how that all pans out. Anyway, that's going to wrap up the list. Thank you guys so much for watching. Really hope you enjoyed seeing kind of an overview of the top Kickstarters throughout the year, at least in the solo gaming community from Rolling Solo's perspective. That's going to pretty much wrap it up. Thank you guys again, and as always, keep on rolling solo.